Hi friends, it's Amy. Welcome to my channel. Today I want to go through the 16 books that I read in the month of November. So let's get to it. So in the month of November, I read 16 books. 4 of them were advanced reader copies. 3 were rereads. 3 were read-alongs or book clubs, and 1 was a buddy read. I read 7 for an adult audience, 5 for a young adult audience, and 4 middle grade. 5 were physical, 4 digital, and 8 were audio. So again, thank you, audiobooks. I had mostly 5-star books, but I did have one that fell below 2.5 stars. Most of my books were 4, 4.5, or 5 stars. I read 3 nonfiction books and 13 fiction books. I read a total of 4,870 pages, which came down to 162.33 pages a day, 304.35 pages per book, and an average rating of 4.4 stars. It was a wonderful month. I loved most of the books that I read. I had a wonderful opportunity towards the end of November to meet an author in a Zoom call through my silent book club online meeting. And oh my gosh, it was awesome. And the fact that it was one of my favorite books that I read just sweetened the pot. So without further ado, let's start from the beginning. The first book that I finished was Passionate Readers by Pernille Ripp. I read this book as professional development for myself as a teacher of reading, and I decided to read it because I saw Pernille Ripp at the WSRA conference in February of 2020, like right before the world shut down. WSRA is Wisconsin State Reading Association for teachers of reading. And she was so inspiring. Her ideas are amazing. Her love of reading, her love of getting good books in her students' hands just was so inspiring. And I was very thrilled then when I somewhat randomly came across her book in Hoopla, and I just decided that I should listen to it. And I did, and it was amazing. I just loved it. It talks about loving reading and sharing your love of reading. It was just the perfect book that I needed to just reinvigorate myself as a reading teacher. And I went right away and I bought a physical copy that I can have on my shelf at school so that I can go back and read her words when I need that bit of inspiration. So it was just a wonderful book to start off my reading experiences in November. It made me very thankful to be a reading teacher, and that's what you want, right? The next book that I finished was Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Sepetys, and this is actually the graphic novel version of the novel. And it was amazing. One of my students read the original novel, and she was halfway done with an assignment to write a review about her favorite book of her middle school career. She was halfway through this novel and scrapped everything, or she was halfway done with her assignment and she scrapped everything that she had done for it because she finished this book and knew that she needed to write about this book. And I decided I have to read this puppy. Then shortly thereafter, it was on NetGalley as the graphic novel version. And oh my goodness, I absolutely can see where she was inspired by this book to recognize how good it is and how moving of a novel it is. This takes place during World War II, during the Soviet Union, or in the Soviet Union. 15-year-old Lena and her family are deported from Lithuania to Siberia, and the conditions that they suffer through are just deplorable. And knowing full well that these are actual conditions that people dealt with during World War II is just heart-wrenching and terrible. And it just, knowing that there was a time when this happened and knowing that this could still be happening today, like, it just, it's so sad. It's sad. And the more we're able to know history and know these things that happened in the past, the more we can stop them from happening again. And so it's the kind of book that I want my students to know, because I want my students to understand why we don't want World War II to happen again. Because sometimes it's really easy to just stay in your own bubble. And so Between Shades of Grey by Ruta Sepetys is just beautiful. And I haven't read the full novel version. And I do actually now want to go back again and read the full novel and see, kind of compare it a little bit. But the graphic novel was just amazing. I absolutely loved it, and I absolutely recommend it, especially if you're interested to know more about World War II that doesn't take place in Germany. This is a perfect fit for that. The next book that I finished was The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. This was a read aloud with my 7th and 8th grade students. I have read this book now 15 times. It is my absolute favorite book in the entire world. If you ask me what my favorite book is, I'm going to say The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton every time. If you ask me to name more favorite books beyond that, it changes every day. But The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton is so much a part of who I am as a teacher and a part of what values I want to instill in my students, in accepting differences and knowing that you aren't just who you are because you were born that way. I want my students to feel the things that are in this novel, and I want them to take away the good, wonderful things in this novel. I love Ponyboy. I love Johnny so much. I love Soda Pop more than I can tell, and I love Rob Lowe forever and always because he played Soda Pop in the movie. One of my favorite read alouds, and I won't be doing it next year because I had 7th and 8th grade, and my next year's 8th graders will have already listened to it. So I just realized that, and it made me sad. Carrying on. The next book that I finished was The Pursuit of God by A.W. Tozer. And I listened to this in a day, one day. I had a whole bunch of driving to do, and I found it on Hoopla, and I was just listening to it. And it was so intriguing and so wonderful. It was on my radar because Krista from Books and Jams did a read along of it in October, and I didn't get to it then. I wasn't ready for the first discussion, and then I just didn't do anything for the second discussion. And still wanted to read it. So I decided to pick it up, and I decided, when I saw it on Hoopla, I just decided to listen to it one night. And I listened to it all in that night. And I'm glad that I have a physical copy of it, because there are definitely parts that I want to look at, that I want to read again, and just really immerse myself into it. And so I'm really excited that I still have it in order to have that experience again with the text. It was really just fascinating and really something that I needed to just bring my faith out a little bit more in what I was doing. So that is The Pursuit of God by A.W. Tozer. The next book that I finished was another read aloud, and that was Say It Out Loud by Allison Varnes. I read this in August as an advanced reader copy, and as soon as I was done reading it, I jumped online and I purchased a copy for my classroom. I love this book. Say It Out Loud elicits so many wonderful discussions when shared with students. We talked about bullies. We talked about plagiarism. We talked about taking responsibility for actions. We talked about letting things fester and grow bigger and bigger and bigger. We talked about the snowball effect. We talked about talking to your parents and being open and honest with them so that they can help you through things when you feel overwhelmed and when things feel dramatic. And it was just so eye-opening, I think, for them to be able to see this really small thing that happened and how much it snowballed into this really big thing and this really big problem between two friends, and realizing that that is something that could actually happen. And that anxiety that the character felt and their empathy towards that anxiety was just, it was just great. We have Charlotte, who has a stutter, and her best friend Maddie has never made her feel bad about her stutter. And one day, after so many times that Maddie has stood up for Charlotte, something happens and Charlotte doesn't step up. Charlotte doesn't do the right thing. And it's a really insignificant moment in time to everybody else around. All of my students were like, just apologize and get back in there. It's fine. Their friendship is going to be fine. Until 3 days later, Charlotte was so nervous about not being forgiven that she didn't say anything. And we just talked about all of these things and how, yeah, it started out with this as this small thing, but then it grew bigger and bigger and bigger. If you can't get your hands on this book, do whatever you can to get your hands on this book, because it also has mentions Wicked and The Wizard of Oz and musical theater, and who doesn't want all those things in their life? So there you go. The next book that I finished was I Take My Coffee Black by Tyler Merritt. This was it. This was my favorite non-reread book of the month. So Tyler Merritt literally rose to fame in 2018 when a video that he made called Before You Called the Cops went viral. And that same video went viral again in 2020 when Jimmy Kimmel played the video on his show. And it's a really candid, honest look at what it means for Tyler Merritt to be growing up as a Black man in America and to see the things that he sees and do the things that he does. He is real and honest and open, and it just was wonderful. And his whole personality came out in so many different ways. I listened to this book on audio, and I can't even imagine consuming this book in any other way, because sitting and listening to this book or doing whatever you're doing while you're listening to this book. When I was driving, listening to this book, I had a new friend sitting in my passenger side with me, just talking and talking and talking and telling me about his life. And it was awesome. And I loved it. And the best part of it was then getting to see him in our Zoom meeting for Silent Book Club. It was such a wonderful experience. He's such a real person. I mean, obviously he's a real every author is a real person, but it was so good. I just loved it. I loved the book. I loved seeing that perspective, and I just think everybody should listen to this book. Be prepared. There are some things that are very hard to listen to. There's some swearing. He's quite a swearer. And there are definitely some tough topics in here, but it's real, it's open, it's honest, and it is very eye-opening. And I totally recommend this book to anybody who wants this perspective in their life. The next book that I finished was Huda F by Huda Fahmy. Huda Fahmy. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce her last name. I'm going to call her Huda F. This is the author's fictionalized autobiography. So at her old school, Huda was the only hijabi wearer. Hijab wearer. And at her new school, there's a very large population of hijabi wearers. So she used to identify as the person who wore the hijabi. Like, there was no other way for her to be, she didn't need another way to be identified, because people knew who she was because she was the one that was wearing the hijab. And now at her new school, because there's a big population of hijabi wearers, she now needs to figure out who she is beyond that. And it was a really, it's a very fun book to read. It was funny. It was very candid. Again, the drawings pulled you right into the story, and it was just, again, very eye-opening to a perspective I have very little knowledge of. And also, I love the title. Did I say that Huda F is a graphic novel? It's a graphic novel. It's YA. The next book that I finished was The Power by Naomi Alderman. I did not love this book. I didn't like this book. I couldn't a lot with this book. This was the book club pick for the book club through one of my libraries. It is a speculative fiction that takes place in a world where young girls develop electrical power and therefore take over as being the most powerful of the two sexes. And then they let the power get to their head, and they rape and pillage and murder and do all kinds of terrible, terrible things to other people. I'm not mad that I read it. I'm really not. It was something to think about. It made you think. I didn't like it. And it has so many 5-star reviews. And that tells me that it's wonderful for someone. It's definitely not wonderful for me. And yeah. The next book then that I got to read was Winter by Marissa Meyer. And oh man, it was the perfect thing to listen to after the last book before. I read this for the Lunar Along, hosted by Bukhara and A Star Reads. It was just a wonderful series to continue rereading. It was just wonderful to be there again and in that world again. It was so great to be on Luna and Winter. It's a wonderful palate cleanser. The next book that I finished was Spy School Revolution by Stuart Gibbs. This is part of the Spy School series. I love this series. Here's the first book. I recently had to buy a replacement because my very first book is going kaput. It has been read and loved so much. I love this series. Ben Ripley is recruited by a spy school that is absolutely secret. So he thinks even that he's being recruited by this science academy, and it turns out that, oh no, you're being recruited into spy school. And every book they dig deeper into all of these conspiracy theories and all this crazy stuff that's happening, and it's just wonderful. It's so fun. My students love it. I love it. I love talking to my students about it. And Spy School Revolution is the 7th book in the series, I think. It takes place with conspiracy theories that go back to the beginning of the United States as a country, that are completely made up by the author, by Stuart Gibbs. And it's just fabulous and wonderful. And I'm not going to talk a lot more about it because it's the 7th in a series, but Spy School by Stuart Gibbs, pick it up, read it. It's great. Anyway, next book that I finished was 5 Total Strangers by Natalie D. Richard. And I just happened to see it and I thought, oh, that looks interesting and neat. And I didn't have anything that I was listening to at that moment. I was waiting for a hold to come through. So I got it. Now, 5 Total Strangers is kind of YA, new adult-ish. The main character is 18, Mira, and she is heading home for the holidays, and there's a big storm coming. So all of the flights are canceled because this storm is brewing and it's terrible. But from what she sees, it's not terrible yet. She feels that they're overreacting. And the person that she sat next to on the plane on the first leg of her trip, decides to rent a car and invites Mira to travel across country with her and her group of friends. So Mira gets into a car as a high school senior. She gets into a car with 4 college students to get home. This could be great, except 1, she's driving with strangers. 2, the airport people were not overreacting when they canceled all the flights. The weather is terrible. And 3, it seems that somebody is out to sabotage them being able to get anywhere in this journey that they are on. It's really propulsive and really just brings you along. And I constantly was trying to figure out what was happening. And it was crazy how much I needed to know what was happening. I really liked it a lot. However, I found the ending to be very abrupt, and I had so many questions yet. The The big questions were answered, absolutely, but the small questions, they weren't. And I had so many questions when the book ended. It was a little bit annoying. This book gave me vibes of One of Us is Lying, where there's bad things happening and everybody's trying to figure out what it is, and there's a limited number of people that could be causing the problem. It's like a locked room murder where somebody in the room is the problem. One of Us is Lying. I was so mad at that book. So mad. I was more satisfied by Five Total Strangers than One of Us is Lying. So take with that what you will. I did enjoy it, and it was very, very propulsive. It was a very quick read, and I did enjoy my reading experience. The next book I finished was Sold on a Monday by Kristina McMorris. This book I buddy read with Danny from Spin Only Speaks, and that added so much to my reading experience, just having somebody to talk to about it. It was so enjoyable to do this as a buddy read. The chapters alternate between Lily's point of view and Ellis's point of view, like third person limited. And so every chapter basically ends on a cliffhanger, and then you have to wait a whole nother chapter to find out how that cliffhanger is going to get resolved. And usually that bugs me. This book, it didn't, because I was very much invested in both of these perspectives. Ellis is a photographer, and he takes a picture for the newspaper that he works with. Actually, for himself, he really takes it, and it gets a lot of attention. And something happens, and he has to try and recreate that picture, and he kind of flubs his way into doing that. What results is a sequence of events that changes the course of Ellis's life and Lily's life in ways that they didn't imagine. And it is so good. I am certainly going to be looking for more from Kristina McMorris going forward. I really loved it. One thing that Danny pointed out that I didn't really notice until she pointed it out, but there's a lot packed into this novel, and there are some things that are kind of packed in there to add suspense that aren't really necessary, but it is, I didn't notice it, and I didn't care when I was reading it, but it's a historical fiction that takes place during the Great Depression, a time when families were doing things that they just were desperate, and they needed to do what they had to do to survive, and it's heartbreaking. It's a heartbreaking book, and but also it is a hopeful book, and I really, really, really enjoyed it. So that was Sold on a Monday by Kristina McMorris. The next book that I finished was Bat Pig by Rob Harrell. Bat Pig follows Gary, who is a pig, and he is bitten by his friend, and then the next day he has superpowers, and he tries to save the city. It's wonderful. It's hilarious. It's just little stories that are just wonderful. I laughed so much reading this book, and I think one thing that drew me to it is that I recognized some of the pictures of some of the drawings of Bat Pig, because a book that I have in my classroom, Wink by Rob Harrell, has those drawings in it. And basically, apparently, Bat Pig started with this book, Wink, which now I need to pick it up and I need to read it, because I want to read how this wonderful comic that is going to make my students laugh came to be. So I was very excited to get that it was an advanced reader copy. And it was just a really cute, quick graphic novel that had me laughing. I was in stitches. It was wonderful. I loved it. The next book that I finished, actually that same night, was The Madness of Crows by Louise Penny. And this book, this is number 17 of the Armand Gamache series by Louise Penny. And I really love this series. I love it a lot. And I will read these books as long as she keeps writing them. As of this point, this was not my favorite of the books. And I don't 100% know why. I don't want to get too much into the plot because it's the 17th in a series, but Armand Gamache is an inspector with the Sûreté in Quebec, and he solves murders. It's, crazy how that happens. But this book takes place after the pandemic has ended. And so it's very surreal. It was very surreal to read a book that took place during the pandemic. I don't even know how to respond. Like, I don't know how I feel about this book right now. I feel unsure. I feel uncertain about my feelings. That makes me feel, it just wasn't my favorite, but I still really enjoyed it. I still really loved it. I loved being back in Three Pines so much. I needed that. I needed that escape to Three Pines. So, I will take it. But, it was a tough one. It was a tough read. The next book that I finished was Where the Light Shines Through by Kathleen Bailey. This is a cozy mystery, and this is an ARC that I got from this website called Book Sirens, and it is it's a book reviewer website. This is the first book that I have selected to read from Book Sirens, and it was cute. It was a cozy mystery. It was a cute, cozy mystery. Olivia Penn is an advice columnist, and she is between jobs, heading to one job from another job, and she decides to go home and spend a week with her dad. And while she's there, her best friend from childhood is murdered, and she becomes embroiled in the investigation because her other best friend is accused of the murder. So she decides that she needs to help solve this mystery. The basic cozy mystery plot, I loved it. What I didn't enjoy about this particularly is that the character of Olivia is so grating with some of her choices. Like, she seriously could have an extra hole in her head, and she would be like, it's fine. Why are you overreacting about the fact that I just got shot in the head? Like, dude, other people can be right sometimes. But I mean, not enough that I didn't enjoy it. I did really enjoy the book, and I think I'm going to be looking for the next book because it had the small town feel. It had the close-knit community. It has great quirky characters. It has a lot of what I love in a cozy mystery series. It just didn't have, the one that was missing was the really likable main character. There were other characters that I did really enjoy though. So I am excited, intrigued to continue on with this series. So that was Where the Light Shines Through by Kathleen Bailey. The very last book that I finished was Alice Fleck's Recipe for Disaster by Rochelle Delaney. This book I have talked about on my channel before. It was one of the books that I was sent from Bookshelf Thomasville. It's a middle grade realistic fiction. It follows Alice Fleck, who hates the fact that her dad has a new girlfriend and also hates being in the spotlight. So when her dad's new girlfriend signs them up for a cooking competition that would be aired on TV, she is not too happy. The girlfriend, of course, had the best of intentions. This was a show that they both loved, and she saw an opportunity and took it. However, things go awry. And Alice is thrown into this situation that she doesn't feel comfortable in, and that is way worse than what anybody thought it was going to be. And there's also a mystery going on because somebody is trying to sabotage the contestants in the TV show. It's really funny and entertaining. The two other kids that she meets at the resort where the show is being taped are Tavi and Henry, and they are such great characters. I just love them. They're quirky and love themselves and just whatever, don't care what anybody else thinks. And they're just the characters that Alice needed to meet because she cares about what everybody thinks. She's too afraid to tell people at school that she loves cooking because somebody at one point told her that cooking was lame. So meeting these two other kids that love who they are and are unapologetically themselves is so cool. And they get into all kinds of scrapes. They're at a Victorian themed festival, so they're surrounded by antiques, and just there's so many wonderful things going on in this novel. It was just so fun to read, and I really enjoyed it a lot. The mystery was great, and it added a cozy mystery aspect to the book, which of course I love. So it was just great. If you're looking for a great middle grade that is funny, a little bit mysterious, and has a culinary competition in it, Alice Fleck's Recipe for Disaster is such a great pick. Great way to finish my November reading. So there you go. This is such a long video. I had a really great reading month, and I'm so glad that I got to share these books with you. Amazingly, now that I am posting this in December, I will have posted a video every month during the year 2021. Next month is my 1-year BookTube anniversary. I hope that you found wonderful things to read in the month of November. I would love to hear what your favorite read during the month of November was. Talk with me down in the comments. I love seeing what you all have to say. Like this video if you want, subscribe if you want to see more, and as always, until I see you again, happy reading. Bye.